Hello, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. First question, as always, can you hear me? Because I'd like to make sure that's going well before I start the show. So just say, yes, I can hear you. Oh, that's nice. Oh, cute granddaughter. For those who don't know what I was saying before I started the show, on the comment section, I'm homeschooling my granddaughter in the days of coronavirus when she can't go to school. And so we had read a book about seeing the sights. And so I was talking about what the sights were. Like in Washington, D.C., in the U.S., we have the Capitol, we have the White House, we have the Washington Monument, Jefferson Memorial, Lincoln Memorial. So then I asked her, what sites there were in our town. And she said, Walmart. She's actually correct, which is kind of sad. It's a really nice town to live in. It's a very pleasant place. People are lovely. We have a little park, and we're near DC, Washington DC. But yeah, we don't exactly have sites. And if you come to my town and say, "Let's go out to eat," I'm going to take you at least 30 minutes away into DC because our restaurants suck. So that's the way things are. So can everybody hear me? I'm just doing my check because I don't like talking to myself. Can everybody hear me? Somebody say yes, you can hear me. And if you can't, somebody say you can hear me. Somebody, please. Oh, thank God. All right. I always check this out because unlike taped video, I can't do it again. So I don't want to talk to myself for 30 minutes while everybody's going, why the hell isn't she saying anything? Anyway, so this is really, by the way, just before I start, I just want to let you know if you want to do a YouTube channel, just I want you to know that it's not that easy. And I just spent 2 hours having a live chat with a person to try to fix the technical problems I was having. 2 hours. And so if you think I've lost my mind, I pretty much have. And I'm a person who does a lot of stuff with the technology. I have my iPhone, I have my iPad, I have 3 laptops, I have blog sites, I do television, I have YouTube now. But damn it, when you can't make something work, it's so freaking frustrating. And when you talk to tech people, they suggest things that make absolutely no sense. And you're like, why don't you understand this? You're tech people. Anyway, yeah, there is a reflection. Thank you very much. I'm having a horrible problem with that right now. And I'm trying to figure out how to fix it. The reflection on my glasses. And I'm going to try to move over a little bit because this is, I have tried different lighting. I'm having a hell of a time with it and I can't figure out quite how to fix it. I've been on YouTube for 6 weeks now. And everybody thinks that, because I had this one guy come out one day and he said this really lovely things like, you're a total idiot. You don't know how to do anything properly on YouTube. And you can't, you're just all over the place. And I was like, dude, why don't you try YouTube? There are tech people who seem to understand this better, but I have done lots and lots of research and good God, I can't figure out the lighting problem. I have a huge light over here. It's called soft lighting. I've got these 2 lights here. I'm still struggling, and it's been 6 weeks, 8 weeks, but I'm glad you're here in spite of all my technical difficulties. But over time, what happens is eventually you learn more and more. And for me, a year from now, you're going to say, "My God, she's so classy," but maybe not today. Yeah, he's an idiot. Let him try it. Exactly. I know, and it's it's an interesting thing because there's different kinds of YouTube people. They're the type that just sit in front of a bookcase. And I do have one of those. It's over here. And I've done stuff from there, from just sitting in front of my bookcase with all my own books on it so I can look really cool. But I have a terrible white wall behind me and it's kind of ugly. And then you sit there and you're boring. It's kind of boring. And I've seen people be very successful with a very boring background. And then I've seen these YouTube people they're so good at they know how to flash things on the screen and then videos come in. And that's awesome. But I'm a criminal profiler. And quite frankly, that's not my style. I appreciate it. But what I really want to do is show you evidence. So I like to show just what there is. So that's my style. And I'm also really lazy and I don't really want to do all the fancy editing shit. So there you go. All righty. So let's start. This case, Jill Dando, I hate to say this is how I found out about the case, but actually, this is actually how I found out about the case. Let me see if I can. Okay, here's how I found out about the case. Okay, that's me over here, Jill over here. Somewhere along the way, somebody said, "Oh my God, you kind of look like Jill Dando." And I don't know that I really do, but we sort of had the same short hairstyle at the time. This was, she was murdered in 1999, and I started TV somewhere in 2001 or two, somewhere in there. So a couple of years later. But I was working on the Madeleine McCann case so much that people knew me from Madeleine McCann, and I had the short hair then, and they said, "Oh my God, you look sort of like Jill Dando." So I did know that Jill Dando existed and had been a very, very popular TV commentator in the UK. But I never really looked into her case. It's just like, one of those things. I was busy and I thought, oh yeah, that's interesting. So recently, one of my subscribers, so I want to say again for my subscribers, oh, by the way, before I forget, because I always do, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Click that button, subscribe. I need the support. Hit the like button that you like this video, and also hit the bell, which means that you'll get you'll get notifications that I'm doing another show. So please do like, subscribe, and hit that bell. So anyway, I really didn't know much about Jill Dando, and one of my subscribers, because I always ask this question, and I'm going to ask you guys too, always feel free to say to me, can you do this case? Because there's so many cases that I've forgotten about. And then you tell me, oh, do this case. I'm like, oh my God, I do remember that case, or sort of remember that case. And I would like to look into it again. And then there's a lot of cases outside of the US, because I am in the US, that people from the United States do not know about. So many cases in the UK that are fascinating, but we over here haven't heard much about them, just like people in the UK haven't heard that much sometimes about the US cases. So we have a kind of different interest sometimes because of what we know. So it's going to be very interesting to go into this particular case, which I have not actually looked at in depth before. And I want to look at this one. Oh, what happened here? Okay, wait a minute. Okay, what the heck? Okay, see, I'm having troubles. It's these technical things. Okay, so Gil Topping UK. I was acquainted with Barry George's mother, and she was devastated that her son was accused of this crime. She knew he wasn't capable of such a crime. And I'm going to be discussing about some of this because it's very interesting when families won't believe their loved one is involved in a crime, even though they have exhibited criminal behavior in the past. Her son has exhibited a lot of criminal behavior in the past, stalking behaviors, attempted rapes, and possibly rapes as well. This is not the sign of a person who's not capable of harming somebody. This is a mother who wants to believe her son would not do such a thing. But we're going to get into that later. But I just want to point that out, that, when families don't want to go there, they don't want to believe someone, especially their own child, is maybe not the best, the most stable child in the world, perhaps has a personality disorder, perhaps is a psychopath. They just don't want to believe that. So I'm going to get to a lot of comments later, but I want to get moving on exactly what the issue is here with the Jill Dando case. And so I'm going to start with that. So interesting. We'll start with just basic information, and I'm going to do it really quick because a lot of people here actually know the basic information, but I'm just going to say it really quick. And I'm going to get it off of a fine site, most reputable site called Wikipedia. Okay, so I always have notes here because, quite frankly, I work with so many cases, it's hard to remember all the details, and I do not want to spend 40 hours memorizing things. So Jill Dando was a British journalist and a TV host, and she did a lot of shows. And it's really interesting to actually look at her I was trying to find a picture of her that wasn't smiling, and I actually had a hell of a time coming up with it because I was trying to match her because I was on television. In that last picture I showed, let's go back to the last picture I showed. It was kind of funny because I was in the middle of a television show when I was trying to find a picture of me with the short hair, and I couldn't get me smiling because I was talking about a homicide, so I wasn't smiling. And I went to look for Jill Dando with a non-smiling look so she would kind of match me. And honest to God, I couldn't find it. She apparently, according to her cousin, was just a delightful human being, absolutely delightful human being. And you know, she was really that kind of girl. She was always smiling. She was kind of a home, you know, just a girl next door type of girl. And certainly didn't piss anybody off. She was very, very nice. And she was murdered on the 26th of April, 1999, on her doorstep. And so I'm not going to go into her career, early life, or any of that stuff, but just looking at the murder itself. So what happened with Jill Dando that particular time? I'm going to put up this picture here. The picture on the right is just a picture of her on the doorstep where she was actually killed. And this is Jill Dando. She's arriving home. She's got a purse on her shoulder. She's got her stuff with her, smiling. She always does. I mean, amazing, very, very, very cheerful human being. And there she is on her doorstep. Now, the picture over here is the last moment she was seen. And this was in a store down a little ways away. She had a kind of a overcoat on, or raincoat, I don't know what you want to call it. In Britain, I'm not sure what it is, a slicker. Okay, guys, what in Britain, what do you call what she's wearing? Is that an overcoat, a raincoat, or a slicker? I'm just curious. Anyway, she was wearing that. And what was interesting to me was she still had her purse on the right shoulder. So that was interesting because as I'm examining a crime scene, I want to know where things are. Right shoulder, left shoulder, because this could make a difference in the crime. So anyway, she looks like a raincoat, says Martin. Okay, looks like a raincoat. We'll go with that. You know, I'm an American, so you know my sometimes my vocabulary is a little bit different. Although oddly, because I spent a little bit of time in the UK and in India, I tend to have some vocabulary that is not too American, and people look at me like I'm like what? And I was also married to a Jamaican for 25 years, and so one of the things I always used to say was, "Oh, well, just plug out the lamp," and then people would look at me and go, "What?" I'm like, I'll plug out the lamp. And they're like, you mean unplug? I'm like, oh, okay. So anyway, feel free to correct me. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Raincoat or a Mac. I do remember that, yeah. So thank you, Lorraine. So anyway, here she was. She's on her way home. And theoretically, she arrives just like this. This is kind of like what the situation was when she arrived. She was about to go into her home and actually did not make it into her home. So let's look at just basic. Oh, somebody said it's a trench coat. Okay, it's a trench coat. Everybody's got a different opinion on that. All right, let's look at the situation of what happened when she arrived in the house. Okay, so let's look at the crime scene first before we go on to all the theories that are out there. So anyway, this is on the left side. By the way, I just want to mention, I spent ungodly amount of hours trying to get crime scene photos or crime scene, some kind of sketches or a police report. I don't know what's up. Can somebody tell me? Now in the US, pretty much everybody leaks everything, so we can like get hold of every kind of piece of information. But I went through so many Google searches, YouTube searches. I went through documentaries, and this is it. This is the best piece of information I could get, and it sucks. I mean, it's a one photo, which somebody said, "Oh, you finally get a photo." You know, okay, it sucks. And then there was this one crime scene sketch. So I just don't know. I don't know if there's a thing in the UK, which prevents crime scene information from getting out. It may be, and I'm not objecting to that. I'm just saying I couldn't get it. So when I talk about crimes, I like to get as much information as I can. I like to have as many of the police reports, crime scene photos, but I'm doing a YouTube show, not a criminal crime scene analysis for the police. So it's not going to be that kind of detail, but I couldn't hardly get anything. This is like it. This was like freaking it. So weird. Any rate, one of the questions, so here we have theoretically as much as we can get of the crime scene. Now, what I did notice was over here, you see this little spot right here? That is the position of a bullet hole. And she was shot on the step, and the bullet went through her head and went through the spot. There's one more picture I want to show because of technical difficulties, I couldn't get the pictures to do the right thing. Okay, where's my other picture? Was it this one? Okay, maybe it's this one. Okay, this is the other one. I wanted to be able to see this actual step. One of the problems that people don't understand with crime scenes is when Jill Dando was shot and her neighbors saw her body lying there, she called for help. And they said, what's going on? And she says, well, she's lying on the doorstep. She's slumped on the doorstep. There's a lot of blood. No, I don't think she's breathing. Then they sent the ambulance and the I think it was the firefighters and stuff. And basically they screwed up the crime scene. They raced in to try to save her life. And it was pretty clear she was actually dead at the time anybody arrived. And so some people will say, why did they not preserve the crime scene? Well, I'm going to say it's because it was Jill Dando, and they wanted to do anything they could to try to save her life. So they raced in, they grabbed her, they moved her, they got her into the ambulance, and the crime scene was completely screwed. And this happens more often than you think it does, to have a completely screwed crime scene. So what you're seeing there, there's a whole lot of crap on the ground, and I like zoomed in on all this crap, and I still have no idea what I'm even looking at. I do believe over here, I'm looking at her purse, and you see the mat, which has been moved. But here's another interesting point. I'm analyzing this, and I'm like, well, when she was attacked, was the mat moved when she was attacked? But then again, did the firefighters move it or the ambulance people move it? They moved her body. Did they just pull the mat out? So it's not really good evidence because I don't know who did what. And I was trying to access a police report that might tell me something, but I couldn't get access to a police report. So if the firefighters could say when we arrived, the mat was straight and we pulled the mat when we moved her, that would be some information. But I have no clue. And the rest of this is just a bunch of junk on the ground. I don't know what I'm looking at. And I could not find any crime scene analysis or crime scene sketches that would tell me a whole heck of a lot. But the only thing that was very interesting was the fact that over here, right up there, is actually a hole. So the bullet went through her head, a bit over the left ear. Well, again, I'm going to say this. I still couldn't get proper information. Was it here? Was it here? Was it here? But somewhere in the left side of her head, somewhere around her ear, she was shot, and the bullet went through at least it was through the door. And so she was obviously low down on the ground. That I can tell you. Now, let's take a look at some of the other issues of the crime scene evidence before we get on who did this. Okay, so on the ground, what they found was, okay, this is, I'm going to move over here. This is a casing that was found on the ground. This is very important because some of the theories is it was a hit. This was an assassination, and some of the questions came up. If this were true, it was an assassination or a hired hit. Why did the guy just leave the casing on the ground, which could identify the weapon? Good question. So there is a casing on the ground. I want to point that out to you. So Helen asks, is there no autopsy report? I'm sure there's an autopsy report. I'm just saying on the internet, I have been able to get jack nothing. I spent so much time Googling and Googling and Googling and coming up with that one picture of the door, the walkway up to the house. That was all I could come up with. And maybe it's out there, but I can't find it. So I don't know if the UK has different standards for certain things. I think in the US, I probably would have been able to access a whole lot more information. Don't know. Maybe it's just this particular case. I have no clue, but quite frankly, I don't know what the autopsy report says. Couldn't find it. So I don't think that's true. Lisa says, I'm 98% positive. When it was first reported, they said she was shot twice. When it was first reported, Lisa, they actually said they thought she was stabbed because of the blood on her head. Later on, they came up with just one shot, which is actually one of the reasons they thought it was a professional hit, because somebody just go boom, boom, boom. They came up, they got her, they shot her once, and they were gone. So that is kind of the way it is. And I want to point out once again, when you're looking at things from a distance, it is a big difference than when you're looking at something when you have access to the police reports and everything. Many, many times, and I've said this over and over again, when I've been brought in on a case and I actually go to the location of the police department and I walk in and they sit me down in a room, an empty room with a desk, and they say, what do you want? And I say, okay, I want the initial reports. I want the crime scene, the police reports. I want the forensic evidence. I want the autopsy. And then they bring all the stuff and lay it out. And I go through every bit of it, and it's completely sometimes different than what you see on the internet or on TV, because only some information is being released, so you're never quite sure what you're looking at. So let's look at another piece of information. Let me back up. That is the casing. That was found at the scene. I want to point that out because it's very, very important that the casing was found at the scene. This theoretically was the gun that was used. It was a 9mm, kind of a short gun. It was known as a possible. They don't know what it is because they never found the gun. I'm going to look down at my notes. Either Beretta or Walter PPK. It's a small gun, so you can put it in your pocket. Essentially, that is the issue about it. And they also found. Now, if you look on this side, you'll see the bullet itself damaged, but there is, I'm not sure where they got that from, but there it is. There is a bullet, and they had knowledge that was a Remington, ammunition. And over here, what's really interesting, do you see right there? Do you see that dot? There were 6 dots around this casing. And this was a huge, huge issue in this case. I'm going to try to explain it to you because it's really confusing. And I called my brother-in-law last night about this because he's an ex-police officer and he happens to know a lot about weapons, and he does sometimes make his own ammunition. So great guy to call. And so what he was telling me was that the casing, okay, there's 6 little indentations around the casing. And for most of you, that's not going to mean a whole hell of a lot. And let me tell you something just so you can feel good about yourselves. Even when you're profiling or you're a detective, you don't know everything. So sometimes what you do is you call a ballistics expert and you say, look, I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. I don't know. I mean, I personally do own a 9mm Smith & Wesson. And I can tell you, I know how to put, go to the range. I know how to shoot the thing. And right now I'm not shooting it much because ammunition has gotten so expensive. I can't afford to shoot it except for at somebody I need to shoot it at. So it's in the safe. I have a 9mm Smith & Wesson. I don't know jack about really ammunition issues. I just don't know. I don't know much about bullets. I just buy the crap that goes in the gun. And I'm going to say that some detectives know more because maybe they do like going to the range and they're dudes, so they're kind of into kind of shooting stuff and all that crap. So my brother-in-law is one of those guys, and he knows more. And one of the things you want to do when you're a profiler or a detective is not to be arrogant and say, I'm not going to ask anybody. No, ask somebody because you don't know shit about certain things. I don't know crap about ammunition. And what happens is this ammunition here, right there, little dots around the casing. And what the hell is that? There were 6 of them. And what happened was, it says that the cartridge case, that's the cartridge case, or what we call a casing, was tampered with. In other words, when I go buy some ammo, since I don't know jack shit about anything and I'm going to do it the easy way, I buy a box. I pay for the box. I open the box. I take my gun out and I put things in the clip. I just go and I shove it in the gun. I'm like, I'm good. That's all I know. But there are people who actually incredibly pack their own ammo. They make their, I don't know, they seat their own bullets in the casing. Totally beyond me. So anyway, what the police said was the cartridge case may have been tampered with, or the explosive removed to deaden the sound of the shooting. So they did it. So what happened here is a thing called crimping. These dots around are called crimping. And that means when you seat the bullet in the casing, it helps hold the bullet in place. Okay, that's what I'm going to say because that's what I was told. All right, so, but what's interesting about this was that one of the theories is this was a professional hit because who does crimping? I mean, it's such a weird thing. Oh my God, somebody crimped it and it did all this manipulation to the gun. So I talked to my brother-in-law. I said, what do you think about crimping? He says, I do it. Then I went on the internet and there was like 700 sites that said, we do it. So, okay, it's not necessarily connected to a professional hit. It's just something people do. And whether the person who shot Jill Dando did this himself or somebody else did it and then he bought the gun and it was just done, I don't know. But it doesn't necessarily indicate a professional hit. So what we have here is a 9mm gun, that he shot one shot out of and killed Jill Dando with one shot. It was they have an idea what kind of gun it was. The gun has never been recovered. They really don't know much more than that. It's just that's what they know. So now the question comes down to, what does all this mean? What in God's name does all this mean? Now let's look at some of the theories behind all of this. So I want to let you know that I watched 2 documentaries on this. And let me tell you the names of, okay, so it's kind of an interesting thing because there were these 2 documentaries. And one was this documentary, The Murder of Jill Dando. And if anybody understands who's sitting to this side, they know that is DCI Hamish Campbell. Now, mind you, I worked a lot on the Madeleine McCann case, and Hamish Campbell had a lot to do with that case. And I'm not too thrilled with his dealings with that case. And there's some interesting things he said, which I'm wondering, was he with the Madeleine McCann case, was he totally on board with looking for an abduction, a person who had abducted Madeleine McCann, or was he kind of hinting that maybe it wasn't an abduction? I don't know. Some interesting stuff he actually said. But quite frankly, he had some control of the Madeleine McCann case. So my initial feeling is, because I am not happy with Scotland Yard's handling of Operation Grange, which he was in charge of at one point. I'm not happy with what they've done. And so my feelings toward Hamish, I'm going to say his name right, Hamish Campbell are not exactly warm and fuzzy. So, but here's what I've always said as a profiler. No, I don't know about that. Thank you very much, Anna Hale. You're prettier. No, I think she was a gorgeous girl. I do think she was a gorgeous girl, Jill Dando, and I think she's very pretty. And it's a very sad thing that she couldn't be around longer. But anyway, let's get back to Hamish Campbell. So one of the things I point out is never throw the baby out with the bathwater. Even though I don't necessarily agree with somebody on one case they worked on, doesn't mean that they might not have some validity in another case they worked on. So I try not to get egos involved with this and say, oh, I have to hate you. No, and maybe there's political reasons why one does one thing one way and one does another thing another way. So Hamish Campbell, so this documentary is called The Murder of Jill Dando. It's by BBC. Very well done documentary, I must say. Very, very, very impressed. So this was one of the documentaries, and Hamish Campbell goes into all the things that happened that led him to Barry George and as a suspect, and why they arrested him, and why he was eventually convicted and then appealed and no longer is just out and free. So he defends his case because he worked this case, and he believes that he did it right. Let's put it that way. He seems to indicate that he believes Barry George is still the one who murdered Jill Dando. By the end of the show, you're kind of clear that he really still believes that. Now, that's one theory, is that Barry George was involved. Now, the other theories, and I want to point them out. Now, there's another documentary out there, which is, let me find it. Oh, yes. All right. So there's another, it's called Jill Dando, the Dando Files. And who we have here is journalist Mark Williams Thomas. That's the guy over here. I don't agree with him on the Madeleine McCann case either. So, he thinks that Madeleine McCann was abducted by somebody. I think he's full of crap, and I don't particularly like his methodologies. But I was going to put that aside, and so I watched this other documentary on Jill Dando, thinking, okay, what has he got? What has he got? And what he's got, you see those boxes? He's got a shitload of boxes. But he doesn't present anything that makes any damn sense. He presents no evidence whatsoever. Just claims that somebody in prison said this. Somebody said it was a gangland hit. Somebody said it could have been the Yugoslavs. It was something to do with Serbians. Then these are the conspiracy theories that have rolled around for quite a while. There's a bunch of them, and I'll tell you why they exist. A bunch of people believe that the killing of Jill Dando was an execution, an assassination, that somebody had planned all of this. And they thought that Barry George, who was the man who was eventually arrested for it, who was kind of a stalker, weirdo dude, the loner type, he couldn't have done it because he wouldn't have the brains to do it. And it was all this planned out thing. And so it had to be an execution, an assassination. And so the concepts were brought up that because Jill Dando was in the public eye and had spoken up, for example, maybe she was looking into a pedophile ring, or maybe she had spoken up against what had happened in Serbia, that they wanted to kind of encourage some kind of support. The problem I have with all of this is, just to be realistic, Jill Dando is a television commentator. I was a television commentator for 15 years. Jill Dando was a host of a show. She was attractive. She was fun. She was well-liked. I didn't get my own show. So she beat me out on that. But the point being that she was a really kind of a cool lady, a nice lady, and not in any way a great threat to anybody. Even if she was supposedly looking into something, she wasn't an investigator. She didn't have some great power. And so for somebody to assassinate her makes very little sense. And also to assassinate her without any point to it. Like, for example, the Serbians came after her to get back at what supposedly it was like NATO bomb, something in the television station in Belgrade or something like that, that they're going to get back at the UK. So they're going to pick on her. Really? Is that what they're going to go after and not even say we killed her because, it makes no sense. And there's a lot of conspiracy stuff going on. A lot of somebody said this and somebody said that. Somebody in prison said this. I'm sorry. So this guy here, William Thomas, Mark William Thomas, he stacks up all these freaking boxes and says he's got all this info. I watched this whole damn documentary for an hour and I came up with nothing. He never described the crime scene. He never described anything except for, first he goes after one theory, then he goes after another theory. I'm like, well, if you were so sure of one theory or the other, why didn't you stick with it? Why did you say the Serbian theory? Oh, and then it could be this. It's one or the other or none. So if you can't back up what you say with evidence, you're just You're just trying to get a television show, a documentary. You're just trying to make a name for yourself. There's no evidence to support anything he says. No, this is, oh, by the way, was she into drugs? Was she a low probability victim? She wasn't into drugs, and she was a low probability victim, except for the fact that she was on TV. Now, having said that, she did work for Crimewatch. This is true, Vanessa. She had a lot of knowledge of what was going on in the industry. I'm telling you, I'm sorry. I've been on TV for years. I know a lot of shit. People aren't trying to kill me. Because she knows a bunch of supposed stuff. Don't give too much credit to a lot of journalism. A lot of journalism is just, you get out there, you tell a story. You're not so concerned about the facts all the time. You tell a story, nobody's going to kill you over it. You know what I mean? Because you can't really do anything with it. I've been around long enough to know that. But there are stalkers. I've had a lot of stalkers in my life. Believe me, stalkers are a big concern. Why is that? When you're on television day after day after day, somebody gets obsessed with you. And it doesn't necessarily mean male or female. It doesn't matter whether it's male or female. People think that, like, if you're female, it's always males that are obsessed. Not necessarily. I've had female stalkers. I had one woman who was a private detective who wanted to be me. So what she did was go onto my website and find out where I was working on cases. And then she would go to that location. I'm not kidding. This really happened. She went to the location. She flew there. And she walked into the police station and said, I'm working with Pat Brown. And they believed it. Then she slept with the detective. And then the detective called me and I'm like, did you sleep with her? And they're like, he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, now she's going to stalk you. The woman was crazy. And then I took all my stuff I was investigating off the internet because, God Lord, that woman was crazy. And so she threatened me. She said she had a gun. She would come after me. I've had a lot of stalkers. Most of them, there's jealousy. There's I want to be, and then there's just all kinds of weird stuff. I mean, I can't even explain how weird it gets. But when you go into somebody's home night after night and you're popular with the viewers, there are certain people who aren't quite emotionally sound that will get into that stuff. Okay, again, the Jimmy Savile scandals have been covered for years within the BBC, and Jill Dando would have been aware of it. Okay, she would have been aware, but it doesn't mean that killing her would make any difference. People don't commit an assassination when it doesn't serve a purpose. This is the kind of stuff that's just dredged up because nobody wants to understand what happened. Here's a good question. She was a good-looking woman. Could it be a rejected suitor? It could be. It could be. It's possible. So when the police started investigating this, they had to try to figure out who the hell would come and shoot this woman. She was shot in broad daylight, in the middle of the day, right on her doorstep. And it was odd. It was definitely an odd thing. So now I want to talk about, so I'm going to say that I watched this whole documentary because people told me that I should pay attention to what this journalist had to say. And I personally think he's full of it. I'm sorry. I don't like to always to disparage somebody, but I saw zero evidence of anything. And I have I'm very frustrated with people who claim things that they can't support. And then they go, oh, I can't tell you this. I can't tell you who it was. I'm sorry. Just don't say anything then. If you can't back it up, shut the hell up. Because all you're doing is exciting people. And guess what? A lot of people want to excite people. I've been very outspoken about television shows and about YouTube shows. They have hundreds of thousands of people, maybe 1 million people watching them. And all they do is make claims that aren't supportable by evidence. Oh, what do you think happened with so-and-so? Oh, yeah. Do you know that maybe this happened? And then everybody's like, oh, maybe it did. No, there's no evidence of that. But they can do show after show after show after show and just keep people enticed, keep people attracted to it, keep people involved and excited and addicted, essentially. So they'll go on, they'll watch the show after show after show after show. And let me tell you, when I'm finished with this show, guess how many more Jill Dando shows I'm going to do? 0. So how much, if I want to make a shitload of money, doing one Jill Dando show is not as good as doing 20 Jill Dando shows and keep pulling you in. Maybe it's a pedophile ring. Maybe it was a Yugoslavs. I can really encourage it. She was possibly ready to be a whistleblower about all the BBC shenanigans. Probably not. These are the things that there's just guesswork. Here's the thing. We have to go back to what does the evidence say? And as a profiler, I stick with the evidence. Now, let's go and take a look at our number one suspect over the years. Now, apparently after this happened, there was nothing that happened for about a year, right? It just simply did not happen for a year. And then at the end of the year, they came up with Barry George. So Barry George, and who the hell is this guy? Well, there's a reason he came into their attention. And by the way, one of the great mistakes they did make in this case, and this happens a lot, so please understand why this happens. There was actually a tip about him that came in very early, way back, right after all of this went down, and it was not followed up. And you'd think, why the hell did you follow it up? And I'm going to guess because when you put out information about a case like this, you get, oh my God, hundreds, if not thousands of tips, and most of them are junk. Most of them are, I think it could be this one. I think it could be my ex-husband. I'm a psychic. I think I saw what happened. You get so much of this stuff, your brain just dies. And then you start recording things and not paying attention. But his information was in there early and it should have been paid attention to. Let's look at what happened. So let me see if I can find this. What am I looking for here? Where'd it go? Where is it? Oh my God, it's disappeared. Okay, so that's the one thing that I was having trouble with, my technical difficulties. Anyway, so what happened was, right after this happened, there was this man, and it was him, who went to this location and he started saying to the people there, they help with employment or something. And he started saying to them, oh my God, he started trying to interact with them. And then he was trying to get them to give him an alibi. I was here at this time, right? And they're like, not necessarily. And then he was over at this cab company and he was trying to get a ride. This is on the same day. He was trying to get a ride, but he didn't have any money. And they wouldn't give him a ride. And then finally he got a ride, but he was acting really weird there too. So what happened was Barry George was acting really freaky. Like something was wrong. I was out of it, kind of like, what? He was crazed. And he was trying to catch himself an alibi. This information was given to the police, but it wasn't followed up for a really long time. So he basically just, stayed out there. And they started looking into him about a year later, which is a damn long time later, which means when you have a year, that's a long time to get rid of evidence. And so one of the things I work on trying to inspire detectives is you really want to analyze the crime correctly in the first 48. You've all heard about the first 48. It's important. The first 48 means you got less than that much time before everything goes to hell. 48 hours is a long time to dump your clothing, to get rid of your car, for all the witnesses to not remember anything. 48 hours. You've got 48 hours. If you can get there, you might get the evidence. When time goes on, witnesses don't remember crap. They make up stuff. They think they saw something, but now they see it differently. And then once the information goes out to the public, you might have 2 witnesses in the beginning, but then you have 20 new witnesses, and then you have 200 new witnesses. 200 people saw one guy. I was like, oh, you were all on that street? You were all on the same street when Jill Dando was murdered? You were all there. So what happens is people start fabricating. And let me tell you, I'm not saying they all do it because they're bad people, but sometimes they're crazy people. Sometimes they're just people who want to help. Sometimes they are the right person. And what happened was there were these 2 places that were giving proper information about Barry George, saying something. This guy was acting really weird, and we were wondering what the hell was wrong with him. But it took them a year to get there. So let's say that Barry George was involved. He had a year to get rid of the weapon, the gun. You had to get rid of anything he had. Let's say he was stalking her and he had a ton of pictures. he would have a year to get rid of a ton of pictures. And then, so when the police showed up, oh, wow, I thought you were a stalker, but you don't have any pictures of Jill Dando, or you only have a couple pictures of Jill Dando. So we don't think it's you. Now, Barry George had a lot of pictures of ladies. He had maps of ladies, where the ladies lived in their homes. He was a stalker, but didn't have particularly a lot on Jill Dando. So the question was he not interested in Jill Dando, or did he throw everything away? We don't know, because 365 days plus went by, and so we have no clue. And that's what happens in an investigation when things aren't followed up, soon enough. So that's a problem. So what do we know about this guy, Barry George? Well, let's be realistic. His family says, such a nice guy. No, he wasn't. I'm sorry. I'm going to say it straight up. The guy had a criminal background. He posed as a police officer. He had been arrested a number of times for sexual assault and possibly rape, but it was pled down, so I can't say he committed rape, but a woman did claim he actually completed the act, but it was pled down, or, so at least attempted rape, sexual assault. There's a number of women who, he was actually arrested for sexual assault. He was arrested for stalking. There was no question he was a stalker. When you put together stalking and sexual assault and also posing as police officers and other things, you have a psychopath. He exhibited psychopathic behavior. He's a dangerous man. He was always dangerous. And to think he was a nice guy, but he just sexually assaulted women, I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. He was a dangerous guy. Does that mean he killed Jill Dando? No, it doesn't. But it does mean he's a dangerous guy. And so when the police found out about him, and here's a guy who, on the day of her murder, started trying to come up with an alibi, was running around in the vicinity. He lived nearby. And he's a stalker, and he's got a history of stalking, he's got a history of sexual assault. Hey, he's a good suspect. Whether he did it or not is not the point. He's a good suspect. You cannot blame the police for going there. So now the question is, all right, he's a good suspect. Did he do it? Is the question. Now, my personal opinion, I don't see any evidence to support the Serbian connection or the pedophile connection or some gangland killing. I see zero evidence of this. Does it mean it could not have happened? No. You know what? Until you find evidence and prove something, you can't say something didn't happen. It's hard to prove a negative. I'm going to say I don't see any support for it. I don't see any evidence that even comes close to proving that's true. I don't see any behaviors in this particular crime that, for me, make me think it's a hit. The guy left. It's kind of funny because when I was talking about the shows, right? So this particular show, the Jill Dando and the Dando Files by our esteemed journalist, he brings this guy on who's supposed to be this expert in gangland killings and hitmen. And it's very strange because he goes on and goes, well, normally, yes, they wouldn't do it in broad daylight. Normally, yes, they wouldn't leave the casing behind. Normally, yes. And he gives like 10 reasons why it's not a hit. And then he goes, but I think it's a hit. So I guess he was hired to say that. But he basically described why it wasn't a hit. I find it very hard to believe it's a hit. There's first of all, when you look at weapons, what's the number one popular weapon of a hitman? It's a 22. And the reason is because a 22 is a very quiet gun. You just simply go behind somebody and pop them in the back of the head. Done. Or you might use a silencer. A silencer was not used. Or if you're kind of a cartel kind of people, you would pull up with a car and just go and mow the person down. And then people would see somebody being mowed down and then the car racing away. And you'd go, well, that was a hit. But this I see nothing in this that looks like a hit to me. So then the question is, if it's not a hit, what the hell is it? What actually happened to Jill Dando? And I think the reason this case sort of is misunderstood is I believe the motive for the crime may be the reason people don't understand it. So let's say we take away the hitman and the Serbian stuff and some big, huge thing. Let's go to a disturbed individual. Okay? Let's go to a disturbed individual. Now, when you go to a disturbed individual, we have a thing called stalkers. Now, I want to explain a little bit about stalkers. As I said, I've been around them. Here's some stalkers. I don't know if any of you know. This was Rebecca. Her name was Rebecca Schaefer. She was killed by Robert Bardo over here. Basically, he became obsessed with her, and then he came and he killed her at her home, at her apartment building. And one of the most important things to know about stalkers is if they can't get enough out of stalking, they sometimes think killing that person will bond them together forever. And think about it. What do you see here? Do you see their two pictures? I took this off the internet. I didn't put these pictures together. They came together. In other words, Bardo over here is now associated with Rebecca over there forever. They're like forever entwined. That's a stalker's dream. And he was caught and he was convicted. Even if he dies, he doesn't care because forever he's with Rebecca. He's the last person that ever touched her, that ever came to her. That is a very important thing to a stalker. How about these people? Anybody know who these people are? I got to check that out because I think somebody's going to know this. No, so who is that? Who are these people? Can somebody tell me? Somebody tell me who is this? Okay, it's gotten very quiet here. Who is this over here? Who is that? Come on, he's super, super famous. Okay, thank you. Okay, we finally got somebody here. Martin, thank you. John Lennon, exactly, that's John Lennon. And the guy who killed him, we're talking about Mark David Chapman, who's over here. Mark David Chapman said he did it for glory. He did it for glory. And so Mark David Chapman over here was a complete loser, nobody. And John Lennon over here was a great, huge somebody. And after Chapman killed him, they became together. They were together again. They were together forever. And Chapman's name is always going to be connected to Lennon. So he became somebody in that moment. That's a stalker thing. So now the question is, if you're looking back at our buddy here, something strange has happened with my stuff here. Hold on a second, guys. I'm having a weird thing here. Oh, that is really, really, really strange. Okay, then. Oh, here we go. Okay, sorry, having issues with my technology again. Okay, so that's a stalker thing. Now, the question would be, if Barry George was a stalker type, was he stalking Jill Dando? Was he stalking her? Did he want to kill her so he could be with her forever? Now, I want to point this out. Some of the people say, "Oh, well, she was only shot once." Well, so what? Big deal. So one of the bizarre things about this crime is they keep saying it's a professional hit, and I don't see that at all. So I'm gonna go back to. I'm going to tell you what I think happened here. Now, I want to read you what somebody said, and this is the stuff you got to watch out for. Okay, let's go back to. I'm going to put this picture up. Now, this is Barry George, and I'll tell you why I have this picture up here. Now, some journalist somewhere, I saw this in the beginning. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting point. This was Bob Wolfenden from The Guardian. He said, as Dando was about to put her keys in the lock to open the front door of her home in Fulham, she was grabbed from behind. With his right arm, the assailant held her and forced her to the ground so that her face was almost touching the tiled step of the porch. Then with his left hand, he fired a single shot to her left temple, killing her instantly. The bullet entered her head just above her ear, parallel to the ground, and came out the right side of her head. All right. So I'm thinking, oh. So he held her with the right arm, shot her with the left. Now take a look at this picture behind me. What do you notice about our friend here, Barry George? Okay, what do you notice about him? What strikes you right away about these two pictures? Because it struck me when I went to look. It struck me. Can anybody tell me? What's the problem here for this man being the suspect then? Anybody got an idea? What's wrong with this picture? Okay, somebody, where is somebody? Somebody out there. Okay, let's see if I got somebody. Oh, wow, I've got so many comments. I missed half of you. Okay, never, there we go. Yes, he is right-handed, exactly. So I went to look, and he's drinking his drink with his right hand. He's pretending to shoot a gun. That's how you shoot a gun if you're right-handed. The dude looks right-handed to me. So now I'm thinking, well, if this is the way it went down, if this is truly the way it went down, then it couldn't be this guy. It couldn't be Barry George. It couldn't be this guy. But here's the problem when you're analyzing crimes, especially when you're dealing with the media. Now, I'm looking back here. I'm looking at this guy who said this. I looked, and I don't know. First of all, I don't know who Bob Wolfington is from The Guardian. I know what The Guardian is, and I don't have great respect for them. But who the hell is this journalist? And what the hell does he know about this crime? And who the hell did he even talk to? What crime scene analyst did he talk to about this crime? Was it just some guy just said this and he decided to say this? This is how the crime went down. So if this were true, somebody grabbed her and pushed her to the ground and shot her in the head. It's not Barry George. It isn't, because he's right-handed. So, by the way, I just want to say thank you to everybody. As more people come to my shows, I get way more comments, and I forget that there's like 10 comments, and I have to move the thing down. So like 700 of you said right-handed. So anyway, so then we look at the situation. So is it, if he's right-handed, it couldn't possibly be Barry George, right? If that were true. Now, I'm going to say, let's take another look at this. The assumption is, by this particular guy, this journalist, was that somebody grabbed her and pushed her to the ground. Now, what happened, one of the neighbors said he heard her scream, and some other, I don't know which one of them said this, one of the journalists or somebody claimed that, I don't know, it couldn't have been Barry George, because whoever did this was very secretive, and he wasn't even, he somehow snuck right up on her and did this to her. I'm like, really? Because, sometimes you get out of your car, you're walking toward your house, and some guy comes up behind you and says, hey, excuse me. I'm sorry. I don't scream right away. I go, yeah, what's up? I've talked to people. You might go, hey, I was wondering, I've got friends down the way and I can't find their house. And so as you're going towards your door, you chit chat. I'm sorry. That's not unreasonable. It doesn't mean that the person who killed Jill Dando did some kind of, some kind of ninja shit. He could have walked right up and talked to her. No, just because nobody saw him do it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And so, what interesting about stalkers, I want to point out about stalkers, is that they follow people a lot. And a lot of times they sit around just looking for opportunities. So it's like, hey, she's a cute woman. Hey, I'm watching her. I might watch her for a month because I'm into it. So now here she gets out of her car. I'm going to walk up behind her. Let's say there were 20 people out there on the street. He might say, hey, I'm not going to do anything because there's 20 people who can see me. So he'll just go on his way and nobody will be the wiser. And then maybe 3 weeks from then, he'll see another woman get out of the vehicle. He'll follow her, or maybe he's stalking a woman. And so he's done this a number of times, but that day, nobody's in sight. He walks up behind her, talks to her for a second, and then something happens. I believe that what may have happened was she got to the door, talking to whomever. And mind you, it's interesting with Barry George. He had a history of approaching women and talking to them and then attacking them. She was going into her house. And now there's a very popular way of getting, for rapists to do this, by the way. As you're putting, this is really frustrating for police too, because they always sometimes get this wrong. They put the key in the door, they open the door and they go in, and then the rapist comes in right behind them and pushes them and then shuts the door and then rapes them and murders them sometimes. And then because there's no sign of it didn't force his way in, they go, oh, she must have known him. No, maybe he was just coming in behind her because she opened the door and there he was, especially if he's talking to her. So he might just be behind her. She never got her key in the door. Jill Dando never got a key in the door. So maybe she was talking to him and it didn't go well. And then he pulled the gun out and said, open the door. And at that point, she might have screamed. And at that point, there's something that people do, which is not an unusual thing to do when you see a gun in your freaking face. You can't get in the door. You can't run. What might happen is that you drop to your knees and you do this. You cover. You go into a cover position like this. Now, if you notice my cover position, it kind of sucks because you crouch down, but what is still available, you can get shot right in the head anyway. But it's just a normal human thing to do this and drop down. And then you hope you're not going to die. So it is entirely possible that whoever did this could have been talking to her, got to the door, tried to get her to go in the door, and then she screamed and dropped down, and he said, open the damn door. And he pushed the gun against her head and shot her. Now, he could have accidentally shot her. When people are disturbed and something goes wrong, they think the person's going to cooperate and they don't cooperate. They become enraged quickly. They become very aggressive. And sometimes they do shit that's not what they plan to do. I think one of the reasons the motive in this crime may be misunderstood is that it may not have been an intentional homicide. Everybody thinks it was a hit. And if it was a stalker, he stalked her to kill her like those other people who wanted to be forever entwined. But we don't know that. It's possible it was just an accident, that it wasn't intended, attempted rape, didn't go right, he ended up accidentally shooting her, and then, oh shit, and then he runs. And then he just leaves and she dies. That is a very big possibility. And so the motive was not homicide. The motive was an attempt at a sexual assault that went wrong. Now, having said that, we can never exactly prove motive until somebody confesses to something. But I believe that is a very big possibility that the motive was never intended to be actually a homicide. Now, having said that, what's also interesting is that when they came across Barry George and they went into his home, they never found that much about Jill Dando. He had a couple pictures, but nothing extreme. Now, it's possible if he was the guy, he could have gotten rid of all that crap in the year. Oh, well, they're going to come after me. I'm going to get rid of my 700 photos of Jill Dando. That would make sense. Or it's possible he was interested. He thought she was cool and cute, and he cut out her picture because he did have a few, along with all the other ladies he had. It is entirely possible he didn't even know it was Jill Dando. He might have simply been in the neighborhood and saw a possible victim and decided, hey, nobody's watching. I'm going to go up behind her. I've got this gun now I bought off some dude. I maybe never even intended to use it as a gun, although he did love guns. He might have just been wanting to use it to try to control his victim. And then he went up to her and he didn't even know she was Jill Dando. It's very possible he had no clue. So one of the problems with this case is there's an assumption. There's an absolute assumption that the person who killed Jill Dando killed her because she was Jill Dando. But there's no absolute proof that's true. It could have been a person who saw a woman alone, who went after her, and just she was an attractive woman, and he thought he'd like to have his way with her. And now, so that's personally the evidence in this case to me does not represent a hit. It does not represent an assassination, and because of the way it went down, I personally don't think it was even a planned homicide. I don't think it was premeditated homicide. I honestly do believe that it probably was more a case if he was going to try to control her and she freaked and screamed and dropped down and he accidentally shot her in the head. And, going on about, oh, it's such a professional hit. It is not that professional to shoot somebody in the damn side of the head. I mean, oh, he did it to muffle the sound. No, maybe because her head was in the way. People make up a lot of stuff that in reality, it's more mundane and not as exciting as what they try to say it is. Sometimes shit just works out that way. Sometimes stuff just happens. It just happens that way. And, when you shoot somebody, sometimes you have backspatter coming, onto your hand from when you shoot them. Depends on the angle. Depends how much hits you. You may only get a little backspatter. You may get a lot of blood, backspatter of blood. It's a lot of these things are just the way things are. So having worked enough cases, I know that there's luck involved. There's things that could go wrong. Not everything is so brilliant. It's a great plan. There was this whole organization. No, maybe it's just a jack off, who thought, "Ooh, look, she's cute. I'm going to go after her because nobody's looking. Oh, here, let me into the house. Ah! Oh, damn it. Open the door. Boom. Oh, shit, I shot her. Crap, I got to get out of here. Oh, maybe I need an alibi. Maybe I'll run down the street. Oh my God, give me an alibi. I got to get out of here. This could have all happened. Now, was it absolutely Barry George? So now let's take a look at, was it him or could it have been somebody else? All right. Now, why did the police arrest him? Well, I'm going to say this. He did have a history of inappropriate behavior. He did live in the area. When they found out he had acted weird at these two locations, trying to get an alibi and trying to get the hell out of there, they became very interested in him. Now, when they went to his house, they found a number of things that they thought were very interesting. For example, this is a picture. This is a picture of him in a really freaky outfit with a gun. So he was not a person who had never handled guns. As a matter of fact, he had a history of guns, and he had things like this, which people who are into guns love to have gun magazines and stuff like that because they're into them. So it's not like he had never touched a gun in his life. And oh my God, why would you think he'd even shoot somebody or have a gun? No, he had guns in his life. He had a history of it. So that was the first thing. Now, the next thing that happened was he had this coat, and they took the coat and they found this just one tiny bit of gunshot residue, GSR, tiny fragment. I mean, and admittedly, it was tiny. Okay, it was inside his right pocket, inside his coat. Now, they tested that against the gunshot residue that was on the casing and in Jill Dando's hair, and it matched. Now, for all of you who don't understand gunshot residue and what matches what, it is complicated. There's about, I'm going to mess this up myself. There's like 5 different varieties of it. And this was like number 2, and it could have been 1, 3, or 4, or 5, but it wasn't. It was 2, and it matched what was in. It was made up of, let me give you the names of what it was made up of. It's made up of, there's 3 ingredients. Let me just be sure I got it right here. Barium, lead, and antimony. And those were what was in the ammo that was in the GSR, and it matched exactly what Jill Dando was shot with. So now the police have this going for them. They say, okay, we got a guy who's a loner. He lives in the area. He's got issues with women. He's been known to stalk. He's been known to have been convicted of sexual assault. He has an interest in guns. He's a freaky dude. And he's got gunshot residue in the inside pocket of his coat. Now, so he was convicted. The jury found him likely to have committed this crime without a reasonable doubt. They convicted him. Now, he appealed. And in the appeal, it gets a little complicated, but apparently somewhere between the appeal, the time he was convicted and the time he was appealed, there were some issues about what you could say was legitimate proof. And so what happened was when the appeal came, the claim was this one tiny particle could have come from someplace else. It could have come from a gun range. It could have come from, if he was on the subway, he was near somebody who had access to, had shot a firearm. It could have gotten on his coat for that reason. He might have been near a police officer who had that. And because a year had gone by, who knows if he could have picked up a bit of gunshot residue from someplace else. In other words, this gunshot residue did not prove, even though it matched the GCR on Jill Dando, that didn't necessarily mean he committed that crime. It just meant he had the same kind, but it could have come from someplace else. Now, let's talk about someplace else. It was inside his coat, inside his pocket. I'm going to say it's pretty hard, even if you were lurking around people who might have touched a gun, that some little piece of gunshot residue is going to somehow jump through the air, go up inside your coat and go down into your pocket. I'm going to say unlikely. However, the court decided that this was not acceptable evidence, and they took that piece of gunshot residue away. Now, there's also some fibers from his clothing that matched something on the scene, but again, they decided it could have been anybody else. And maybe the firefighters had that same kind of clothing. Maybe somebody, next door, maybe she had come in contact with somebody and that fiber stuck to her. And even though Barry George had a fiber that matched, it could have come from somebody else. So what happens with a legal team, especially a defense team, is they will say, if you can't prove absolutely it came from that person and it could have come from someplace else, you have to eliminate that. So they basically eliminated the fiber and they eliminated the GCR, the gunshot residue. So now what did you have left? You had a weird dude who was in the vicinity thereof. And that's not a very good case at that point. So therefore, he was released. Now, that a lot of people will say at this point that this means that Barry George is innocent. His family certainly will say that. And a lot of people will say that he's innocent. That is not what the court case proved. What the court case said was he was not able to be proven guilty. Now, I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm just saying the court case was not able to prove him guilty because they eliminated two pieces of evidence, which were quite interesting. Now, I don't know, I don't necessarily say I could blame the jury that if they were there and they said, well, they were told that this speck of evidence could have come from someplace else, whether they would say, I personally think that gunshot residue shouldn't have been in his pocket that matched Jill Dando's. The fact that he had fiber also, the fact that he tried to make up an alibi, the fact that he had a history of stalking and sexual assault, the fact that he was in the area, all of these things make me think, put all together, a fairly believable case that he was guilty of this crime. However, they also may think there's just enough reasonable doubt that I don't feel comfortable finding him guilty. Now, so the first time around, they did find him guilty, mind you. That's why he ended up 8 years in prison. And then with the appeal, they took away the gunshot residue, and then it kind of left the case being very circumstantial. So, and this is true. Just Me says there was no DNA that linked him to the scene. No, there was not. There was not. And then you say, how unique is GSR to each gun? There are 5 types of gunshot residue, these categories. And the point being that he had one of the 5, and the one of the 5 was matching also to this gunshot residue. So it could have been 4 others, but it wasn't. It was this one. And the fact that it was in his pocket, and he said he had not accessed any other guns, he hadn't been to a range, all this kind of stuff. You wonder how the hell did that gunshot residue get into his pocket? So the problem is there's a big difference between feeling comfortable with this being a case where you can convict the guy or saying he was a very good suspect. I'm going to say at this point in time, I find zero proof to support that this was any kind of a hit, that this was any kind of, the Bosnians were involved, or the pedophiles were involved, or the gangland killers were involved. There's no reason whatsoever that anybody had any reason to kill Jill Dando. There was no evidence of that, not one shred of evidence. All the evidence pointed to an individual who took an opportunity. Barry George did certainly come across as the most likely suspect A great deal of circumstantial evidence and some physical evidence did seem to support that he may well have committed this crime. And it is my personal opinion, if he did, and I'm going to say this because he likes to sue people like everybody else does, if he did, that I believe it was not a premeditated homicide, that it would have been a attempted sexual assault gone wrong, where the trigger of the gun was accidentally pulled in an attempt to control, and she was shot, and it was like, oh crap. That is the way, as a profiler, I find the most reasonable theory. And this is based on, of course, as I say, I don't have access to the police files, and since so little information is even available, it's craziness. I just that's the most reasonable profile I can come up with of this crime, having analyzed the crime scene evidence. And here's, for example, she prevented Crimewatch UK for years. Could have been an aggrieved mobster. No, I mean, there's people have this idea that somebody. I mean, here's the funny thing: a mobster, if she was on there talking about crimes, he probably thought it was cool. I mean, I have serial killers who love me. I mean, they're like, "Hey, Pat," they write me letters and say, "Oh, Pat, I'm in jail for this, blah blah blah." They're like my best friend. They're not that angry. They're not, just because she does a stupid Crime Watch show. I mean, it's not like they're bent out of shape about it. I mean, they're not. I mean, this is unnecessary for them to be bent out of shape about. Killing her serves no purpose. And the crime as it went down does not look like a hit of any sort. It's just, it doesn't look that way. And so what happens is, and this is what usually happens, that when a crime goes unsolved, or when a guy comes he's let go and is claimed to be innocent, everybody wants to come up with the answer, and they want to find the answer that's never been found. And it has got to be more amazing because nobody's been able to figure it out. So it must be some huge conspiracy, when a lot of times it's just some dumb shit doing some dumb shit. I mean, it's sad, but it's true. And I've worked enough crimes to realize how many people just do dumb shit stuff. They're not that brilliant. Things just go the way they go. And a lot of times it's hard to prove whatever happened because either there were not enough witnesses, witnesses were incorrect in the descriptions, he got lucky, the firefighters completely screwed up the scene, so that went haywire. Things happen. The tip came in, but unfortunately, instead of seeing him within 48 hours, that took a year. Stuff goes like that. And suspects usually, just me says, suspects usually keep or leave something of themselves, of the victim or crime scene, where any fingerprints are. Again, this is a famous saying, that every time when a person commits a crime, they leave something or take something. Yeah, you know how much time that proves out to be absolutely true? Some of the time. A lot of times you ain't got shit. I mean, this is the reality of it. Because the firefighters came, the ambulance, they screw up everything. There's footprints everywhere. People are touching everything. Let's assume it was an individual came up with an attempt to do a sexual homicide. A sexual assault. He never even touched her. Only had his hand on the gun, and the gun went with him. What is he going to leave behind? We're not talking about somebody who climbed in a window, crawled across a floor, raped somebody for 2 hours. We're not talking about that. We're talking about an instant in time where, there wasn't much going on, and then there were so many other people there, it just completely screws the scene. That's the way it works. So, and that is a good point. Lisa says, if she managed to turn on the doorstep, he would have shot her with his right hand. I want to point out something about this, which is interesting, because if I needed to grab somebody, I could shoot with my left hand. I'm a right-handed person, but my left hand actually shoots better than my right hand. Go figure. I'm most comfortable doing movement with the right hand. Now, if I knew I needed to grab something with the right hand, I might use my left hand to shoot. On the other hand, like you point out, if she ducked down, he could just go like this and shoot her. I mean, he may never have touched her at all. I mean, or he may have tried to grab her with his left hand and then he just shot her with his right. There's not really. It's just, let's put it this way. Just me said any blood spatter on his clothes. 1 year went by. 1 year, and this is the problem. Again, we watch too many shows on television where a feather of a Alaskan owl somehow ended up inside the person's ear. And because of that, then there was another Alaskan owl feather found in the shoe. Now, that doesn't happen. I mean, most of the time, you'd be surprised how little evidence there is sometimes. That sucks, but it's the reality of it. And that's why so many cases, especially cold cases, it's not that they're not solved. It's that they can't go to prosecution because they just don't have enough evidence to make sure that he gets convicted. They're like, yeah, we know he did it, but by the time he got there, he threw his shoes away. He washed this down. He got rid of his car. Everything is just gone. I mean, that's the reality of the way things work. So I'm going to answer a few of you more questions. Let's see. Alleged the coat was secondhand and not owned at the time of the crime. Yeah, watch out for alleged shit. And this is one of the problems we have with certain journalists, is that they like to allege stuff all over the place. They allege this and say, well, I can't tell you my source. Well, you know why? Because, they're claiming that because their source doesn't want to be, killed. But a lot of times it's just because they're making the stuff up. And so alleged is alleged. I don't pay attention to alleged. I pay attention to what evidence do we have. I don't buy that. Jill Dando was on the verge of exposing pedophiles and the government allegedly. Again, alleged. No, she wasn't. She was. Okay, let's get this straight. Jill Dando was so busy being a television commentator. She didn't have time to do the level of investigation that she could prove anything. I mean, I know this because I've worked in the business. I mean, I don't know how many shows I've done where the host is looking at the questions for me. They don't even care what my answers are. They got 3 questions. And they're asking the 3 questions. They don't even hear my answers. And they don't know a damn thing about the case that I'm talking about. They don't know anything in depth. They're filling a piece of time. And that's what it's about. So do I believe that Jill Dando was heavily investigating? She was going out there and she was going into the underworld and finding out all this information. No, she was a television host and she had she even admitted she was doing a whole lot of TV. She was so busy that she had 3 different kinds of shows she was doing. Somebody asked her if they thought the public would get bored of her because she was everywhere. And she said, well, it could be, but I really enjoy what I'm doing. She didn't have time to do any kind of in-depth investigation. It's just nonsense. And there's no reason for them to kill her because what is she really going to prove something? She's not really going to prove anything. So that's one of those things that, again, we sometimes want to make more of than it. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, this is true. Okay. Yes, but few British people have guns. Yes, Robert. I know that in America we have a shitload of guns, but guess what? Barry did have guns. He at least admitted to 2 of them. He had 2 guns in the past. Therefore, he could have had 3 guns. People have guns because they buy them illegally. Maybe it's true that you can't go down to a gun store and buy them like we do in the U.S., but it doesn't mean that it has to be a Yugoslav who brought it in from abroad. I mean, there are guns. They do exist. And Barry did have in the past access to guns. So that's not true. Oh, Jan, could it have been mistaken identity? I don't think so. Again, here's one of the problems we have when we talk about mistaken identity. And I'm going to point out that you got a point there. I'm not going to say you don't have a point there. It could have been. I mean, there are times when that mistaken identity does occur. In other words, they meant to hit the house next door, but they hit her instead. They thought she was so-and-so. But I'm going to say this. If somebody really wanted somebody dead, I don't think they would have mistaken Jill Dando. I don't think that's true. In the middle of the freaking day. No, I don't buy that. And there, again, is no evidence of that. So one of the things, again, we do is let's take a look at the evidence we do have. So we have somebody who was a top suspect and had like everything kind of pointing to him. I'm not saying he committed the crime. I'm just saying a whole lot of stuff pointed to him. And yet we don't want to look that way. We want to look at some theory over here, which has absolutely nothing pointing to him. Oh, I want to point this out. Oh my God, yes. Oh, good Lord Almighty. The Jacqueline. If Barry George was a man with a low IQ, how the hell could he have committed this crime and left no DNA evidence? Okay, this is a great question, actually, Jacqueline. I have heard this in so many crimes. Low IQ. What the hell is a low IQ anyway? By the way, I used to work with people who were mentally challenged. It used to be called mentally retarded, but now they keep changing the term. So anyway, I worked in a house with 3 ladies who were mentally challenged, Down syndrome, other issues, what was once called mentally retarded. And I'm going to tell you, they were mentally retarded. I knew they were. You can tell the difference between a person who is mentally retarded and a person who is not. A mentally retarded person can have a good life. And I'm going to keep using that word in spite of the fact somebody's going to say, oh, that's not politically correct. Okay, but I'm going to use it because I'm trying to make the point. They have a birth defect that has prevented their ability to go past a certain point. And when you meet them, you know, like immediately that they have an issue. Now, this guy, he joined the army, for God's sakes. Mentally retarded people do not join the army, okay? They don't hold regular jobs in society. They might work in a sheltered workshop or something like that. They don't, he got married to a Japanese lady, supposedly. He was out there, he was out and about. He is not mentally retarded. Just because he wasn't the most brilliant guy that ever walked the face of the earth has nothing to do with anything. He was, he was perfectly capable of getting through the day by himself. But what happens a lot of times is they will try to say, especially the defense attorney, that his IQ was below 70 and therefore he could not have figured out how to do anything. Bullcrap. I mean, first of all, again, as I point out, how brilliant was his crime? Maybe he walked up to her, said a few words, tried to get her to let him in the house. She refused and he accidentally shot her in the head, if that happened. How brilliant is that? It's not. It's a failure, actually. In other words, he didn't succeed in what he was trying to do. He lost control. He made a mistake, and then he just ran away. A lot of evidence isn't left at a scene like that. It was only a few. It was very quick. There's not much left. Although a casing was left. That was evidence left. The bullet was there. That's evidence left. I mean, what else do you want? I mean, there's nothing brilliant about this crime scene. And I think people trying to make it brilliant is unfortunate because, and Barry George is not a mentally retarded person. He just may not be Einstein, but he's not mentally retarded. He's able to function in society and move around and get married and have a job. He exhibits psychopathy. He exhibits emotional issues, personality disorder, absolutely. But that doesn't mean he's stupid. I think he was also weak. What the hell does that mean? He attacked a bunch of women. Maybe he was a little weak, so he didn't fight them well enough. Maybe that's why he thought he needed a gun if he was going to commit another crime. I'm not saying it's him again, but what does that have to do with anything? If she dropped to her knees and he accidentally shot her, didn't require any kind of strength. So that's just not necessarily. This is interesting. Just Me says, yes, I don't know this case. Like the Laura Ann Wine case where her assailant pushed her into the house and murdered her. There was no sign of forced entry there. Yeah, exactly. So there's all kinds of things that can happen that people just get away with stuff. Now, I want to point out about the CT. Oh, yeah, God knows. Just me. I know this was the late 90s, but no CCTVs or cameras, sometimes no. And let me tell you, I have family is in law enforcement, and see the cameras these days. Oh my God, are they a blessing? Because a lot of times the motive isn't a big huge secret. And the motive is something looks like a gang killing or somebody just pissed off at somebody, but then the guy shoots somebody, jumps in his car, and the car goes away, and then you got the camera and picks up the license plate, and then another camera picks it up, and oh look, he went into that location. I mean, those cameras, oh thank God, they're getting criminals off the street. But if there's not a camera, again, you don't necessarily see it. Oh, I want to point out a thing about witnesses. God knows, I discussed this with the Son of Sam issue where different people thought they saw different killers, and people said, well, that had to mean that there were more than one person. No, witnesses are notoriously poor witnesses. I mean, there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, I remember a time when I was walking in Philadelphia in Pennsylvania in the U.S., and I was walking down the street, and I heard bang, really loud bang, and immediately stopped and thought, oh my God, was that a gunshot? And I asked myself, was that a gunshot? And it kind of like you could hear the little echo, and then it went away. And then a second later, I was like, what did I actually hear? I wasn't sure of myself. I thought I heard a gunshot. But then I wasn't sure of myself because it dissipated so quickly that I couldn't focus on it to figure it out. So what happens with witnesses is when something happens, a lot of times it's very quick. They don't have time to focus really well. So they don't necessarily see things clearly. They may imagine they saw things clearly, especially when then the police come out and say, did you see anybody at whatever time it was on this boulevard? Oh yeah, I remember this guy running down the street. Maybe they saw some guy who was he just got a phone call from his girlfriend, said, where are you? I'm in the restaurant. He hurries along, and then they say, oh, that guy. You have erroneous witness reports all the time. It's a huge problem in investigations. And I'm going to tell you a personal story to show you how bad some witnesses are, because I am like the world's freaking worst witness. I have what they call, well, there's a thing called face blindness, which means you don't do really well with faces. And I swear to God, there's times when I've looked in crowds and not thought I couldn't recognize my own child. I've never been good with faces. And one time I went into a pet store. I was buying cat food for my cat. And this guy came up to me and said, oh, Pat, I'm sorry, I didn't say Pat because I didn't know who it was. Excuse me, ma'am. Do you need something? I said, yeah, I can't find the cat food for my cat. He goes, oh, yeah, we're out of it here. I'll go in the back and get you the bag. I said, okay. And I'm standing there waiting for the guy to come back. And another man walked up, another employee, and said, can I help you? And I said, oh, no, the other guy's already helping me. And he said, what did he look like? And I said, well, I think he's like tall white guy with like long blonde hair. And then the guy came back with the cat food bag. He was short, black, and bald. And the other employee just looked at me and went, really? I went, not even close. I do not do well with identification or memory to identify people. It's been that way all my life. So God help me if the police say, who did you see running down the boulevard? God knows what I'll say that probably isn't true. Probably I will say, don't trust me. But a lot of people will tell you, oh, I saw so-and-so. It's kind of like when you ask somebody, can you tell me how to get to such and such a place? And they give you directions in spite of the fact they have no clue. People like to help. Or they like to not be the one who didn't know. So you can't exactly trust witnesses. Sometimes they're great, but sometimes they just suck. And so there were so many people saying different things. There was really no evidence of anything. That's interesting. It's a bit worrying that he's pretending to shoot a gun. I thought that was kind of weird. I don't know when that was taken, why it was taken. I will give him the benefit of the doubt just because I'm going to say this. Somebody took that picture and probably a journalist was behind it. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if the journalist said, so if you were going to hold the gun, how would you hold it? And he thought he should cooperate. That happens all the time. So I don't know. It is a little creepy, but I'm not going to say that it means necessarily that he wasn't manipulated into that crap. So, but I want to say one thing about, let me pronounce his name correctly, because I always have a problem. DCI Hamish Campbell. When I saw the show, I kind of thought he was trying to defend a little bit of the probably lackadaisical, finding of Barry George as a suspect. It took him way too long, but I have to say, I rather was in agreement with him for almost everything he said during that particular documentary. And I don't like his stance with Madeleine McCann, but I try to take each thing somebody says, regardless of whether I approve of something else they've said, as did it have any validity. And I thought he did a pretty good job in that documentary. Came across in a very, I thought, reasonable manner. So let's see if I can answer. Oh, thank you, Robert. Excellent food for thought. One of the things I try to do with these shows is I try to stick with the evidence. I try to go with what is most logical, most reasonable, and not always a popular one because it just isn't always, because especially if it's been in the news for so long and I don't have a popular opinion. But as I said, I just go with what I see. There are cases where somebody's killed by a mob, or they're killed by. It is an assassination. I just don't see it here. I don't see any evidence of it. The police said they never could find anything. There was no intelligence supporting anything like that. And yet they had a suspect who was a pretty good, darn good suspect, and they had good circumstantial and physical evidence. And I understand why the decision was vacated, why they decided that, they just decided that it wasn't good enough. And they took away the physical evidence and said, okay, work with what you got left. And there wasn't enough left to be a solid conviction. So I understand that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it couldn't have committed the crime. It just means that they couldn't prove he committed the crime. And I think that's, is important. Let's face the, and I really get annoyed when people go, oh, well, the poor guy, everybody's so mean to him. I'm sorry. You're a criminal. He was a repeat criminal. He committed sexual assaults against women. I mean, I don't understand the sympathy here. I really don't. I'm sorry. Anybody who commits a sexual assault against a female is a psychopathic sex predator. Doesn't mean he committed this crime, but it does mean that he is what he is. And that's not a very admirable thing to be. And he's a dangerous person. And it's possible that now that, he's under the, everybody's watching him and all that stuff, he may not commit these kind of, well, actually, supposedly he did kind of do some stuff again that was questionable. And I'm not going to go there because there are some issues about the journalist not being honorable about that. But he did have a criminal record. And he was jailed for sexual assault. So I'm sorry, folks, but don't tell me this is Mr. Nice Guy. I have no sympathy for this crap, because I'm going to tell you something. Anybody who crosses the line to sexually assault another human being is a psychopath, a psychopathic sex predator. If they don't get caught and don't have fear of getting caught, they will commit the crime again. They are always a serial predator. Never, there's not just one. It's not like, that's like potato chips. You don't just eat one and then you're done. You eat more. And any sexual predator who doesn't get caught or doesn't fear getting caught will commit the crime again. He is a serial predator, a serial rapist, or a serial killer. He's a psychopathic serial predator. And he is a kind of human being, quite frankly, is not a pleasant person to be around, or a pleasant person for society to have to deal with. So maybe the family wants to believe that this guy who's had this history is suddenly Mr. Nice Guy, and they can believe that. But I don't think the public has to buy into that crap. He may not have committed this crime, but it doesn't make him a good guy either. So that's and I still say the evidence, the majority of the evidence still supports that he should be a top suspect, even if he didn't commit the crime, he still is a top suspect for all the circumstantial and physical evidence that points to that. Let's see. He was denied compensation for wrongful imprisonment, including on appeal, on the basis that there was a case that the jury could reach a verdict in a different jury. Well, let me put it this way with jury trials. Jury trials are just a crapshoot anyway. People get in prison because the jury decided to find them guilty, and people get off because the jury decided to find them not guilty. The jury trials, in my opinion, are garbage. A jury has no education in crime scene analysis or psychopathy or criminal anything. They have zero education. These are 12 people taken off of a bus stop who are suddenly thrown into the courtroom and told different experts who have totally different opinions are going to tell them this is true or this is true. And you, who have no education whatsoever and way less education than those experts, you're supposed to make the final decision whether the experts are right. It's nonsense. I've been against the jury system forever and ever because I think it's insane. I've always pointed out this way. If I want my car fixed, I'm not going to get 12 people off a damn bus stop who know nothing about cars to fix my car. And then take those 12 people to a bunch of mechanics and have the mechanics give differing opinions on how to fix the car. And then these people who've never fixed a car are going to go, well, I think mechanic one is right. They don't know. They do their best. I'm not putting them down for their heart or their decision to be a good citizen, but they're in a territory they've got zero training for. And yet they're supposed to make the most important decision in somebody's life. They're supposed to decide whether somebody is guilty or innocent, and they have no ability, real true ability to do so. I think it's phenomenal this has continued the way it is, especially with the amount of forensics and things that are so complicated these days. These people just really, they really haven't got a clue. And both the prosecution and the defense attorney just play them because they don't know. They don't know. And they're just trying their best. And it's just really sad, really sad. Yeah, me too. Martin says, I wouldn't want my personal fate to be in the hands of a jury. And it's a really tough thing because you've got the jury system and then you've got a judge system where sometimes you have 3 judges. And people will say, well, the judges could be, crooked. Just for the government, you don't have a jury of your peers, but then a jury of your peers may be a bunch of idiots. So I say that in a nice way. I prefer a professional jury. I would be willing to be on a professional jury. That means that I have the training to analyze crime scenes and to analyze all these different issues and to not be fooled by experts. But I also don't have, I don't really, I don't know the person who's being charged. It's not like I care. I'm not emotionally connected in that sense. So I can objectively look at these situations, whereas juries a lot of times are very, very subjective. They got a lot of emotions going on. They get fooled by people and they don't know what to believe and not to believe. I'd be terrified. Juries made up of Pat Browns. Well, perhaps it would be good to have the other jury, if we had a professional jury, to have people who weren't like me, but were very, very well versed professionally, so that we could have a discussion, which I don't mind, because when I do my analysis, I don't mind if somebody comes in and says, well, wait a minute, did you think of this? And I go, you got a good point there. I did not think of that. And that's another good way of looking at it. So it's very important to have professional people be able to do the analysis and then, come out with the best conclusion they can. I don't know. This is interesting. Lisa says, Fred West wasn't the brightest bulb in the pack, but managed to kill and conceal his crimes for many years. One of the biggest difficulties with stranger homicides is you don't know who the hell the stranger is. Most homicides are solved because, there's a fight in a bar, and then Jack shoots John, and then Jack runs. And then you go there, and the police say, who did it? It was Jack, or it's the ex-boyfriend, or it's, there's some connection. So most homicides are not difficult to solve. The difficult part is making sure you have all the evidence, that you don't screw that up. So when it goes to court, it's just everything's in a row and it's all solid. But then there are those weird crimes, and the stranger homicides is the most difficult, because generally speaking, a stranger homicide is usually a predator of some sort, and a stalker, a serial rapist, a serial killer. And what they do is they live their life in a fantasy world, thinking about what they could do, but they're not. People think that they can't control themselves. That's bullshit. They can control themselves. They can wait. So what'll happen is they'll drive around. They go into like a mall or some some shopping center, and they'll walk in, and there'll be a lot of people around, and they'll go get their groceries, and they'll come out, and they go home. They do the next day. They do the same thing. It goes on and on. The third week, they come out of a store, and there happens to be nobody around except this one girl, and she disappears, and nobody sees it. So because nobody sees it, you have no freaking clue who it is of the entire neighborhood, which may be a hell of a lot of people if you're in a city. You just have no freaking clue. And unless they leave DNA that already matches into a DNA bank. So you can get the DNA and match it and go, oh yeah, it's so-and-so. He's already in the bank. He's a felon, whatever. Even if there's DNA, but the guy's never been in the criminal justice system, there's no way to even, match it to anything unless at some point you get the guy and then you get his DNA and you match it. But the stranger homicides are one hell of a thing. It's a whole different methodology of trying to solve crime than your normal crime. So really dumb shits get away with serial crimes. Believe me, most serial killers are not brilliant. Stop watching those silly Hollywood shows and all these Netflix shows, which, oh my God, this brilliant serial killer. No. Most serial killers just jump out of the bush and hit you over the head. And then the girl's dead in the bushes and nobody has a clue who did it. And he goes home and eats a hamburger, and that's the way it is. And so that's why when you look at a lot of serial killers, when they catch them, it's 30 years later. 30 years later. Either they screw up dreadfully at some point because they just get careless, or the DNA finally matches something. But generally speaking, it's as hard as hell to catch them because you just don't know who the heck they are, So that is a big problem. So anyway, that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed a different viewpoint. Mostly I wanted to point out, again, motive. When people look at motives, they sometimes make motives out of the air. Well, it could have been that she pissed off this person. She could have pissed off a pedophile ring. She could have pissed off the Yugoslavs. I mean, there's no evidence of that kind of motive. But the way the crime went down, it's also possible that, the motive wasn't to kill her. The motive was to control her, and it went wrong. So from what I see and from the evidence that exists, I would say, I believe that is the more possible profile. Now, again, I can't prove it because those things have to be proven in a court of law. I'm just pointing out that this, to me, with the evidence that we have and the way the crime went down, it seems more likely to me that this was a sexual assault gone wrong and was an accidental shooting, and that wasn't planned, and that's why it's so difficult to figure out. So that's my information I'm going to put into the ring, so that there is another point of view, and I hope most people feel that I've it's valid enough based on evidence, and that's what I try to do. So next week I'll be back, and again, put in your ideas for who you might like to have me profile, or the crime you find particularly interesting. Every day I'm finding new crimes that I hadn't heard of, and also crimes that I've forgotten about. And so it's kind of exciting that I'm getting to review all these crimes and go do more crime scene analysis. I like doing it. Again, please subscribe and support the channel. Please like this video, and please hit the bell so that you get informed. And please also, pass on the information about the channel to friends and other people who are interested in crime. I do things differently than some people. Some people do a lot of true crime stuff where they tell the whole story and get all, they got all the videos and all that stuff. My thing is evidence, and so I'm taking a different approach, and I hope you like the different approach. Everybody's got something to offer, and this is what I have to offer. So thank you very much. Thank you. Excellent analysis. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I also appreciate nice one, Pat. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Thank you, Robert. Very interesting. Bye bye. Please send me your ideas, and I'm going to be here every week, and maybe here a long time if I get support for the channel, and therefore at some point I should be able to catch up with it. Thank you, Veronica, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.